Attorney Smith, it's a real pleasure to have you here, even though the reason for you being here today is very troublesome. You are one of many who have been victimized by this effort at DOGE to destroy, I'm going to call it destroy American government. You might have a different frame for it, but talk to us about what you have experienced and what the experiences of your members have been like since you began getting notifications that DOGE had entered the Department of Education.
I would categorize it the same way that you just did. What we have is a full frontal attack on our American democracy, our government, and the public services that American people rely on. Uh, and what we have experienced since the first day of this administration, my members and I, my coworkers and I, is just intentional infliction of emotional distress and a complete disruption of the services Americans rely on.
Mm. Let's talk about the Department of Education in particular. It has, up until this administration began, sort of been an agency that sort of sat in the background and did education related things in the minds of most Americans to the extent it crossed our mind at all. Talk with us about what the role of the Department of Education was prior to this administration and the impact of this administration and the DOGE folks, I guess, coming in and disrupting that.
Yeah, so real broadly, our entire agency, one of the smallest federal agencies, existed to for two purposes. One, to fund this nation's schools, school districts, universities, and then two, to make sure to provide oversight to make sure that the entities that received our taxpayer funding, our money, did
Mm.
right by our kids. And so we had grant making arms, funding arms to make sure that schools like, universities like Harvard and other universities were able to fund life-saving, research, medical research that schools that did not have in communities that did not have a large property tax base were still able to serve our babies. And then we had our enforcement arms, arms like my former office, the Office for Civil Rights, that made sure that when we sent our babies to these schools that received our funding, that our babies were not discriminated against, that our
Mm.
babies received their educational accommodations, that our daughters who wanted to participate in sports had, there was funding for that to happen. And this administration does not want that oversight
Yeah.
and does not want our schools to be supported.
Now, when I'm not on these airwaves, I run a law center and I have it on pretty good authority. How I came about this authority is not important. But there were a number of cases at OCR, the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Education, that had been pending, some of which had been pending across administrations. And I'm talking going back into the early 2010s, 2015s ish, 20 teens rather. Where are those cases now? If you and your colleagues have been summarily dismissed, what are we to make of those cases that were pending? There were some that were looking at consent decrees that were looking at really ameliorating some of the very violative disruptions to education that our students were experiencing as a result of their rights not being upheld. Where do those cases stand now?
Those cases are not being worked on. Those cases are in purgatory. We did an article or a publication released an article about a case we had in the state of Texas where a Black student was pepper sprayed and kneed by a white school resource officer for engaging in an argument with another student who wasn't Black, and that other student didn't get pepper sprayed, didn't get kneed, didn't get sent to 30 days of a detention. And so that case opened in our office, in the Dallas office, which was the busiest civil rights office, because we had jurisdiction over Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. There's lots of civil rights complaints from those states. And that was open last year. And they, had a wonderful attorney they were working with. They have not been able to contact that attorney since January because that attorney has been placed on leave along with every other employee in the Dallas office of the United States Department of Education, um, you know, uh, along with most other
Right.
attorneys in the Office for Civil Rights. So, those cases are just going to stay. There's no desire to have oversight or to give those American citizens recourse.
Hmm. Now, when it comes to what the Department of Education is morphing into, I have an 18-year-old who, is going off to college this year, as do many of my friends. Yeah, yeah, exactly. God help us all. What can we expect as parents? The FAFSA form and student aid and all. Okay, y'all didn't see the face she just made, but she just made a face that made me a little concerned. What can you tell us, attorney, about what that process, what all of those functions that the Department of Education was a part of, what is that going to look like for those of us still with children in school going forward?
Man, I hope you guys have a lot of savings or some GoFundMe's to do, because that the work's just not going to get done. Those people have been fired. So if you're waiting on financial aid for your child to determine what schools your child is going to go to, you're going to be waiting for a while. The schools themselves, the universities themselves don't have funding. This administration is asking them to make some crazy capitulations to, or they're going to reduce funding. So the schools might not even know what they can give your child if your child can receive financial aid. So if you are not, if you don't have $70,000 at your disposal to write a check, I, and this is where this administration unfortunately succeeded, because we were, my colleagues and we had our heads down. We were doing our work like other federal employees. We didn't talk about we didn't feel the need to market ourselves. And so that allowed this administration to lie to the American people about the things we did do, which
Wow.
we did not do. We did not, force woke curriculum. We did not, force people to be transgender. That's not what we do. That's what states are in charge of. What we did do is make sure that your babies had the funding they needed to go to college.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
Yeah.
And that's not being done.
So I have a theory, and I'm hoping you can disprove this theory, or at least give me reason to put this theory to rest. My theory is that their 180-day playbook from Project 2025, which concludes around July 19th, that's their 180 days. I am predicting, and what has been keeping me up at night is a concern that we're going to get to the end of June when tens of thousands, dare I say millions of pre-K through 11th grade students are going to be unleashed into our communities with no real school-based funding that they used to be able to rely upon in terms of free lunch, free breakfast, summer programs, summer youth employment type programs. Yes, we know the states are now going to have to pick it up. I suspect most states won't. They certainly won't cover it in full as compared to what the federal government was doing. But then we're also going to have these 12th graders, dare I say millions of them, who are going to be graduating high school with, as you said, no real understanding as to what their financial realities are going to be for them or their parents going into college, at the same time that the police departments are going to have full police immunity during the summertime. I see your face again, attorney. Come on, I'm gonna need you to tell me, no, Lurie, you crazy. That ain't gonna happen. I don't think you're gonna say that though. Am I wrong about this? Because I've been promoting this fear of mine for the past year and a half, and I am very concerned that we are far closer to it coming true than not. And I'm praying you're gonna tell me, nah, girl, we good. We all right.
No, I have the same concerns. And that's,
Jesus.
that's why I start off this program saying that what we have right now is a full frontal attack on the American public.
My God.
You know, not to say that the federal government does not have the right to reduce its workforce or to rearrange things. Absolutely, it does. As a union, we exist to help implement those rearrangements, to make sure that that services aren't discontinued, that, things aren't done in a discriminatory manner. And this administration has not engaged with us. We have asked the questions that should be normal about, what happens to the work, what happens to FAFSA, what happens to these student loans now that you've laid off, almost half of this workforce. They have not been able to deliver those answers to us. And, what we've heard from our secretary in the news on Fox News is that, her plans to send all that to the Small Business Administration. Well, they've laid off their people too. So who's going to do this work?
So you're going to have a FAFSA application pending in somebody's email inbox, maybe somewhere.
And those people probably had to return their government issued computer. I mean, you send an email to me. I don't have it. I ain't got it. I can't.
So what can we do? I'm so mad we couldn't get you on earlier because I got 11 more questions, Attorney Smith. We may have to bring you back. What can we, the people, do? Is there anything we can do at this point short of, begging our governors to fill in the gap 100%, which we know is going to cause problems and shortfalls in other areas. What would you suggest? What do you, as the leader of this union, what do you need from the American public right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I need my fellow American citizens to call their members of Congress, to call their senators, the people who work for them, and tell them they need to get on their jobs. They need to make sure, they need to check this administration, this executive administration, and stop this from happening. Now, in the state of New York, we've had uh, the Attorney General and a lot of other, Maryland, California, they filed lawsuits to get a, preliminary injunction to get our people back to work so that the states can continue receiving services from my members. So we've been working with that, but I think we need members of Congress need to hear from their constituents.
Right.
When they don't hear from your listeners, their constituents, they're thinking, oh, well, maybe it's not that bad.
Right.
But it's going to get bad. We need to start screaming out before the fire reaches us, because it is coming.
Mm. And it feels like I can already feel the heat and smell the
Yep.
smoke. That's how
Well, with
close
an
this
18-year-old,
is.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And and I often say this, we're in a better position for him than my parents were for me. Like, I was one of them. College, I'm going. Where's it at? I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't know, but it's going to happen. And it happened off of the strength of 3 jobs, cleaning apartments and selling my plasma. And I did that for several years. That's how I made child, yes. But thankfully, our son is not in that position, but far too many families and kids are. And considering the financial aid that so many of us were going to rely upon for our children is not going to be there, I think it is safe to assume that the overwhelming majority, particularly of our kids from our communities, are going to be the ones come fall who are making very different decisions than what they had planned just a little while ago.
Well, absolutely. I was a recipient of a Pell Grants. That's how I got from
Same.
Gary, Indiana to Harvard, when my mother only made $28,000 a year. Uh, we have our kids who are going to be relying on federal student aid. And not only that, even if you come from wealth, one of the functions of the U.S. Department of Education, like I said, was to make sure that these schools did right by our kids, to make sure that if your parents or if you sold your plasma to go to a university, that you weren't graduating with a worthless degree.
Right.
Our agency, my co-members, my colleagues have forgiven or eliminated billions of dollars of student loans from people who graduated from universities and realized their diploma wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. They couldn't get a
Mhm.
job.
Yeah.
And so and to free us from this, burden of student loans, if we're unable to obtain employment, that
Right.
would help us pay that off. And so, just on every end, we are being attacked. And again, for federal employees, we've done this work quietly and silently. People have relied on it, not even realizing it's coming from us.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, now it takes us being eliminated for people to realize how much they needed us.
You never miss it until it's gone. Attorney
That's so true.
Sheria Smith, I really do hope we can get you back because I feel like that we've just scratched the surface of this conversation. I mean, I'm thinking podcast as well. Thank you so much for giving us some time today. For people who want to support, we got like 10 seconds before the man cuts us off. What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a wonderful federation, the American Federation of Government Employees. So you can connect with us or learn about what we're doing on afge.org. If you want to donate to our litigation on afge.org, there's going to be a link to fund our fight. And then if you want to know specifically what's happening with me, my members and I in the U.S. Department of Education, our website is afge252ed.org.